The Arctic wind screamed across the frozen wasteland, carrying ice crystals like tiny daggers. A mother polar bear stood on the edge of a collapsing ice shelf, her 8-month-old cub trapped on the other side. The blizzard intensified. Visibility dropped to zero, and the temperature plummeted to -50 degrees. She had seconds to decide: jump and risk both their lives, or stay and watch her cub vanish into the wide abyss. Her eyes locked onto her baby through the swirling snow. What happened in the next 30 seconds would defy every law of nature and survival. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments right now. Let's start. 3 days earlier, the Arctic Ocean stretched endlessly under a pale winter sun. Mother bear, who scientists would later call Aurora, moved gracefully across the thick sea ice with her cub, Luna, trailing behind. Luna was playful, tumbling through snowdrifts, pouncing on imaginary seals, completely unaware of the dangers lurking in this frozen paradise. Aurora had been teaching her survival skills for months: how to hunt, how to identify thin ice, how to conserve energy during the long Arctic winter. But nothing could prepare them for what was coming. The morning started like any other. Aurora caught a ringed seal, their first substantial meal in 6 days. Luna ate eagerly, her tiny paws holding onto the precious food. Mother bears in the Arctic can go weeks without eating, but cubs need constant nutrition to survive the brutal conditions. After feeding, Aurora sensed something unusual. The air pressure changed. Birds that normally circled the area suddenly vanished. The silence was unnatural, pressing down on the landscape like a heavy blanket. Experienced Arctic predators know this silence. It is the warning before nature unleashes its fury. Aurora's instincts kicked into overdrive. She needed to find shelter immediately. She nudged Luna urgently, guiding her toward a pressure ridge where ice formations created natural barriers against wind. But they were still 3 miles away from adequate protection. The sky darkened rapidly, shifting from pale blue to an ominous gray within minutes. Then it hit. The blizzard arrived without mercy. Winds exploded across the ice at 70 miles per hour, picking up loose snow and creating a white wall of chaos. Visibility vanished instantly. Aurora pulled Luna close, using her massive body as a shield. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 15 minutes. This was not a normal Arctic storm. This was a polar blizzard, one of nature's most lethal phenomena. Meteorologists would later classify it as a once-in-a-decade event. But Aurora did not know statistics. She only knew one thing: protect her cub at all costs. The wind roared like 1,000 freight trains colliding simultaneously. Aurora could barely see her own paws. She pressed Luna underneath her belly, creating a warm pocket of air between the frozen ground and her thick fur. Mother polar bears have evolved over millennia to withstand extreme conditions. Their fur is not actually white, but transparent, reflecting light and providing camouflage. Beneath the fur lies black skin that absorbs heat from any available sunlight. Under the skin sits a 4-inch layer of blubber, nature's perfect insulation. But Luna was still young. Her blubber layer was thin, her fur not fully developed. Without Aurora's protection, she would freeze to death within an hour. Aurora positioned herself strategically, her back facing the wind, creating a barrier between the storm and her vulnerable cub. The snow accumulated rapidly around them, forming a natural cave. This was actually beneficial. Snow is an excellent insulator. Inuit people have built igloos using this principle for thousands of years. For 2 hours, they remained motionless. The blizzard raged on, dumping 3 feet of snow per hour. The ice beneath them groaned under the pressure of shifting winds and accumulating weight. Then Aurora felt it, a vibration. Subtle at first, then increasingly violent. The ice shelf was moving. Climate change has made Arctic ice increasingly unstable. What used to be solid platforms now fracture under stress. The ice they were standing on had been connected to a larger formation. But the storm's intensity created pressure differentials. A thunderous crack split the air, audible even above the howling wind. The sound resembled a gunshot magnified 1,000 times. Aurora's heart raced. She knew that sound's ice breaking. She lifted herself slightly, trying to assess the situation without exposing Luna to the wind. Through the swirling snow, she saw the nightmare unfolding. A massive crack was racing toward them, splitting the ice shelf in half. She had maybe 10 seconds to react. She grabbed Luna by the scruff of her neck and ran. Aurora's powerful legs propelled her forward, each stride covering 12 feet. Polar bears can run up to 25 miles per hour despite weighing up to 700 pounds. But running on cracking ice during a blizzard is not like running on solid ground. Each step could be her last. The crack widened behind her, spreading like a zipper being pulled open. The sound was deafening, ice grinding against ice. The ocean below surging upward through the widening gap. She ran with everything she had, Luna dangling from her jaws. 15 feet from potential safety, the ice beneath her back legs gave way. She lunged forward, desperately, throwing Luna ahead with all her strength. The cub tumbled through the air and landed safely on the stable section of ice. But Aurora was not so fortunate. Her back half plunged into the frigid water. The Arctic Ocean is approximately 29 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to kill a human in under 5 minutes. But Aurora was not human. Her body immediately activated survival mechanisms. Blood vessels constricted in her extremities, preserving core temperature. Her thick fur trapped air, providing temporary buoyancy. She clawed at the ice edge, her massive paws digging into the surface, trying to pull herself up. But the ice was too smooth, too slippery. Every attempt resulted in her sliding back down. The current beneath the ice pulled at her, trying to drag her under the shelf where she would drown in darkness. Luna stood on the opposite side, crying out in distress. The gap between them was now 20 feet wide and growing. The cub paced frantically along the edge, her tiny voice barely audible over the storm. Aurora made one final, desperate heave and managed to pull herself onto the ice. She lay there for a moment, gasping, her body shaking from exertion and cold. When she looked up, her heart shattered. Luna was on the other side of an impassable channel of black water. The blizzard continued. Its assault time was running out. Aurora stood at the edge of the crack, staring across at Luna. The gap was too wide to jump safely, especially with the ice so unstable. The water below churned violently, filled with chunks of ice moving at dangerous speeds. If she jumped and missed, both of them would die. If she stayed, Luna would freeze or starve. Polar bear cubs cannot survive alone in these conditions. They lack the hunting skills, the body mass, the experience necessary to navigate Arctic dangers. The wind velocity increased to 85 miles per hour. The wind chill factor pushed the effective temperature to -90 degrees. At that temperature, exposed skin freezes in under 2 minutes. Luna's cries grew weaker. She was fading. Aurora began pacing along the edge, searching for a narrower crossing point. She moved 50 yards north. The gap actually widened. She turned and ran south, passing her original position, desperately scanning for options. 100 yards south, she found it. A large chunk of ice had wedged itself partially across the gap, creating a potential bridge. But it was precarious, bobbing up and down with the water's movement, clearly unstable. It could support her weight for seconds at most. She would have to time it perfectly, leap onto the floating ice, then immediately jump again to the other side before it capsized. The margin for error was 0. One miscalculation meant death. She looked back toward Luna. The cub had stopped moving, lying down in the snow, her energy depleted. Aurora made her decision. She backed up 30 feet, giving herself a running start. Her breathing slowed. Her focus narrowed. Everything disappeared except the path ahead. The storm, the cold, the fear. All of it faded into background noise. This moment crystallized into pure instinct. She was a mother protecting her child. Nothing else mattered. She started running. Her massive body accelerated, paws pounding the ice in a rhythmic thunder. 20 feet from the edge, she pushed off with explosive force. Her 700-pound body launched into the air above the deadly water below. Time seemed to slow as Aurora sailed through the air. Snowflakes hung suspended around her like frozen stars. her legs extended forward, reaching for the floating ice chunk. She could see every detail with crystal clarity, the jagged edges of the ice, the black water beneath, Luna's motionless form in the distance. Her front paws hit the floating ice with tremendous impact. The chunk immediately tilted under her weight, sinking on one side, rising on the other. She had less than the seconds before it would flip completely. Without pausing, she used the sinking momentum as a springboard, pushing off with her back legs. In a second jump, the floating ice capsized. Behind her, disappearing beneath the surface, she flew across the remaining gap, her trajectory lower now, her energy depleting. She was not going to make it. Her front paws hit the edge of the far ice shelf, but her back legs splashed into the water. The cold bit into her like acid. She clawed frantically at the ice, her powerful shoulder muscles straining. Her back claws found purchase on an underwater ice ledge. Using it as leverage, she heaved herself upward with a roar that cut through the wind. With one final, desperate push, she pulled her entire body onto solid ice. She lay there, sides heaving, ice crusting on her wet fur. But she had made it. She had crossed the impossible gap. Luna lifted her head weakly. Recognition sparked in her eyes. Aurora dragged herself forward, every movement requiring monumental effort. Her body temperature had dropped dangerously low. The wet fur on her back half was already freezing solid, forming ice sheets between the hairs. In this condition, she would normally seek shelter immediately and dry off. But first, she needed to reach her cub. She covered the distance in agonizing slow motion. When she finally reached Luna, she collapsed beside her, wrapping her body around the tiny cub. Luna burrowed into her mother's chest, whimpering softly. They had found each other, but the blizzard was far from over. Aurora knew they could not stay exposed. She needed to create shelter immediately. With the last reserves of her strength, she began digging. Polar bears are expert excavators, capable of digging through packed snow and ice to create dens. Female polar bears dig maternity dens to give birth during winter, creating insulated chambers that can be 30 degrees warmer than outside temperatures. Aurora dug frantically, using her massive paws like shovels. Snow flew behind her in great arcs. Within 20 minutes, she had created a tunnel leading to a small chamber. She pushed Luna inside first, then backed in herself, using her body to block the entrance. The wind howled outside, but inside the den, the temperature immediately felt warmer. The snow walls absorbed sound, creating an eerie quiet after hours of deafening chaos. Aurora licked Luna methodically, stimulating circulation, checking for injuries. The cub was hypothermic, but alive. Aurora positioned herself around Luna, sharing her body heat, her own wet fur gradually drying in the enclosed space. The blizzard continued for 18 more hours inside their snow cave. Aurora and Luna waited it out. Aurora did not sleep. She maintained constant vigilance, listening to the storm's progression, monitoring Luna's breathing, adjusting her position to maximize warmth transfer. Mother polar bears can go into a walking hibernation state where their metabolism slows dramatically, conserving energy while remaining conscious. Aurora entered this state, her heart rate dropping, her body temperature lowering slightly to preserve resources. Luna slept deeply, her small body pressed against her mother's massive chest. In the darkness of the den, Aurora reflected on nothing. Animals do not contemplate or philosophize. They simply exist, responding to immediate needs with instinct honed over millions of years of evolution. But if she could think in human terms, perhaps she would recognize what had just occurred. She had defied probability, physics, and fate itself. She had achieved the impossible because failure was not an option. The bond between mother and child had transcended the natural world's brutal limitations. When Aurora finally emerged from the den, the world had transformed. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a landscape of pristine white. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting pink and orange hues across the ice. The air was still and bitterly cold, but calm. She looked back at the channel that had separated them. It had frozen over during the night, the water covered with a thin sheet of new ice. If she had waited just 12 hours, she could have walked across safely. But hindsight is meaningless in survival situations. She had made the right decision with the information available. Luna emerged from the den, shaking snow from her fur. She looked healthier, her eyes bright with renewed energy. She bounded around Aurora playfully, relieved to be alive and moving again. Aurora began walking, heading toward a location where seals were known to gather. They needed food urgently. The exertion from the previous day had depleted her reserves dangerously low. She had not eaten in 9 days now, but her body continued functioning, drawing on fat reserves, prioritizing survival. 3 miles later, they reached a seal-breathing hole. Aurora positioned herself downwind. Motionless as a statue, Luna watched from a distance, observing her mother's hunting technique. 2 hours passed. Then a ringed seal surfaced for air. Aurora struck with lightning speed, her paw smashing down on the seal before it could react. She dragged it onto the ice and fed. Luna joined her, eating eagerly. Life continued. What happened during the blizzard would never be documented by scientists or filmed by nature photographers. No human witnessed Aurora's impossible leap or her determination to save Luna. But survival. Stories like this occur daily in the Arctic, unseen and unrecorded. Nature does not care about witnesses or recognition. It simply unfolds in its brutal, beautiful complexity. Aurora and Luna would face many more challenges in the years ahead. The Arctic is unforgiving, climate change is altering their habitat, and survival grows harder each year. But for now, on this morning after the storm, they were together. They were alive, and that was enough. The end.